"Don't touch that drawer." That's what she said. Not please, not I'll explain. Just those 4 words, flat as spilled milk. She was barefoot, wearing one of my old t-shirts, sipping from a mug that definitely wasn't ours. I had come home early. The drawer in question, top left of her writing desk, the one she never used, except for stamps and expired coupons. My hand froze mid-reach. I smiled. "Is there a bomb in here or something?" She didn't smile back. Now, most people would stop there. Respect privacy, maybe. Me? I opened the damn drawer. There were 2 things inside. A folded receipt from a boutique hotel across town, dated last Thursday. A necklace. Gold. A name engraved on it, not mine. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, already knowing. She sat down, calm, controlled, too calm. "I crossed the line," she said, "and now you get to choose. Stay and listen, or walk away." I almost laughed, the audacity, the ceremony of it. Like it was a scene she'd rehearsed in her head for weeks, maybe months. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. Just waited for my answer like a teacher waiting for a slow kid to finish reading the prompt. I didn't walk away. I ran. But not out the door. Not yet. I ran to the bedroom, grabbed my laptop, opened our shared photo storage, and started digging. Because something told me this wasn't new. This wasn't Thursday. This was years in the making. And I was right. What I found? Well, I'll get to that in part 2. Let's just say, it wasn't just a name on the necklace. It was a signature, one I'd seen before, in a different city, on a different woman, years ago, before I even met her. And now, everything is burning. I stared at the necklace until the letters blurred. The name etched into the gold was Ilara. That was the name of a girl I dated 7 years ago. Briefly, messily, someone who disappeared from my life without warning after we spent 2 chaotic, magnetic months pretending we could survive reality. That Ilara had been wildfire, and I'd barely escaped without being completely scorched. I hadn't heard from her in years. So why was her name engraved in a necklace in my wife's drawer? I didn't say anything to Maribel, not yet. I left the necklace where I found it, careful not to let her see my hands shaking. She was still seated at the kitchen table, flipping through a book she wasn't reading, sipping coffee from that stranger's mug like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just detonated our entire marriage with a 10-second monologue. I went to the bedroom, opened my laptop, and started combing through our shared photo backup account. Hundreds of images, birthdays, barbecues, blurry vacation selfies, all perfectly curated. But I wasn't looking for us. I was looking for background noise, the kind of stuff people forget to crop. And sure enough, there she was, in 3 photos. Always blurry, always distant, but the same posture, same walk. Long auburn hair tied the same way Ilara used to wear it. That ribbon I once bought her still wrapped around her wrist like a promise. The first image was from a winery tour last October. Ilara was in the reflection of a glass panel behind us. The second, my wife's gallery show in March. A tall woman in the crowd, back turned, wearing that same red coat Ilara always wore. The third, clear as day, 2 tables behind us at a brunch last month. Sunglasses, wide brim hat, but the smile, I knew that smile. My throat dried out. I messaged Ilara once, years ago, long after we split, and she never replied. I thought I imagined her face since then. Memory had turned her into vapor. But now here she was, reappearing like a ghost, sewn into the seams of my marriage. I walked back to the kitchen, my mind racing. Maribel looked up but didn't speak, just stared. I asked calmly, "Where did you get the necklace?" She blinked slowly. "You already know." "No," I said. "I think I know, but I want to hear it from you." She paused, then stood up, not with shame or panic, but with this sickening air of quiet liberation, like I'd finally caught up to where she'd been for weeks. "She found me first," she said. "She asked if I knew you, and I did. She said she needed closure. I didn't know what that meant, not at first." "Did you love her?" she asked, as if it was relevant, as if my answer would change anything. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Maribel walked past me toward the bedroom, pulled her overnight bag from under the bed, zipped it shut in a single motion, and said, "You're still trying to solve it like a puzzle, but this isn't about Ilara." "Not really?" She paused in the doorway. "This is about the parts of you I was never allowed to meet." And then she was gone. Not in a dramatic storm-out kind of way. No shouting, no tears. Just the click of the door and the kind of silence that makes you check if you're still breathing. I was left alone in a house full of things we bought together, standing next to a drawer I wish I had never opened. But I couldn't leave it there. Because I remembered something else. Ilara never wore gold. She hated it. So why was her name on that necklace? And who, exactly, had given it to Maribel? The next morning, I found her gloves on the kitchen counter. She never left her gloves behind. Maribel had this thing about cold fingers. Even when it was barely chilly, she kept gloves stashed in her purse, coat, car, desk drawer, anywhere they might be needed. But there they were, black leather, soft-lined, neatly folded, left behind like they were meant to be found. I didn't touch them. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time, not moving. The fridge hummed, the walls creaked. My phone buzzed once with a news alert I couldn't care less about. Everything felt surgical, too quiet, too sterile. Like the house had decided it no longer belonged to anyone. I should have gone to work, should have called someone, should have done anything really, except what I actually did. I opened a blank browser tab and typed her name. Ilara Whitlow. I hadn't searched her name in years. She was never big on social media, and what little existed about her had disappeared after 2018. No Facebook, no Instagram, just a handful of old poetry contest submissions and a blurry panel photo from an arts nonprofit event in Denver. But there was one recent result, a workshop in Portland. Creative nonfiction, just last month. Ilara was listed as one of the guest readers. The listing included an email address. I stared at it for almost 15 minutes before I typed, subject. I think we need to talk. You may not remember me. Caleb Hart. I found something with your name on it, in my wife's drawer. Please tell me this isn't what I think it is. I expected nothing, or maybe a curt, leave me alone. But within 10 minutes she replied, meet me tomorrow, the library cafe on Redwood, 2 p.m., don't bring anyone. It was signed simply, E. That entire day felt like walking with invisible weights chained to my ankles. I cleaned the kitchen even though nothing was dirty. Rearranged books, moved pillows, replied to emails like I wasn't living in a parallel universe. That night, I lay in bed and tried to replay everything I knew, or thought I knew, about Ilara. She had vanished after our last fight. No texts, no voicemails. I'd assumed she ghosted me out of self-preservation. But now? I couldn't tell if she was a clue, a trap, or a confession waiting to happen. The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early. Every time the door opened, my pulse kicked. When she finally walked in, it was like watching a movie flicker back to life. Same posture, same eyes, but different. Colder, leaner, dressed like she hadn't owned a color in years. She sat down across from me, like we were picking up a conversation we left, unfinished, a decade ago. I didn't expect you to write, she said. I didn't expect you to be wearing my wife's perfume, I replied. She didn't deny it. Ilara, I began, already feeling dizzy. How long have you been talking to her? She stirred her tea slowly. 6 months, but I didn't know she was your wife at first. She used her middle name on the blog. Blog? She wrote about you, not by name. But I knew. My hands curled into fists under the table. So what is this then? A coincidence? A game? Are you two working together or... She cut me off. She didn't know either, not until I told her. That shut me up. She reached out because she thought her husband was emotionally absent, distant, closed off. She wrote these beautiful, brutal essays about trying to reach someone who didn't want to be reached. I commented anonymously. We started emailing. I only realized it was you when she sent a photo of the backyard, that ugly ceramic owl you insisted on keeping. My stomach twisted. So you just kept going, I said, voice shaking. You talked to her for months and didn't tell either of us? I was trying to help, she said softly. And maybe I was trying to understand too. Understand what? Ilara looked at me then, fully, deeply, and I knew the next words before she spoke them. Why you disappeared on me without a word. The cafe noise faded. A bell rang from the counter. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Everything felt far away, because in that moment, I realized something. I'd never told Maribel about Ilara, not really. I mentioned her once vaguely, as a past mistake I'd rather forget. I buried that part of my life like roadkill under asphalt, but apparently, the past doesn't stay buried. especially not when it shows up in your kitchen drawer with someone else's handwriting and a scent you thought you'd never smell again. And Alara wasn't finished. "There's something else," she said, pulling a small envelope from her coat. "You should see this." She slid it across the table. My name was on it, not Caleb Hart. Caleb Whitlow. I stared at the envelope like it had teeth. My name, or some version of it, was scrawled in the center in slanted rushed ink, Caleb Whitlow. I hadn't heard that name since I was 21, and I'd never told Maribel about it, not even once. It wasn't just a name. It was a former self, the one I spent years burying under borrowed confidence and legal name changes, hoping I'd never have to explain any of it. And yet, here it was, being pushed across a cafe table by a woman I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. I looked up at Alara, heart thudding, hands clammy. "Where did you get this?" "It came in the mail," she said. 2 weeks ago. No return address, no postmark, just that. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, lined, torn at the edge like it had been ripped from a journal. It wasn't typed, it was handwritten, messy, familiar. One glance, and my gut knew the truth. It was my handwriting, except I hadn't written it. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. I lied about who I was. I lied to protect someone. And I think it's starting again. If you're reading this, I probably don't have the guts to tell the truth in person. Please don't trust her." There was no signature, just a date, scrawled in the bottom corner, October 11th, 2016. My breath caught. That was the week I met Maribel. "You see it now, don't you?" Ilara said quietly. "This wasn't an affair. It's a loop." I shook my head slowly. This doesn't make sense. This looks like my handwriting, but I never wrote this. I never mailed it." "I know," she said, "but you must have told someone, or someone wrote it for you. That sentence stuck to my ribs like wet cement. Someone wrote it for me, but who would have done that? And why? Unless... I looked back down at the note, the phrasing, the guilt, the repetition of lie. It was too specific, almost theatrical, like it was written by someone trying to be me, not just speak to me. Alara slid her tea away and leaned in closer. "There's more. I didn't just get this. Maribel did too, but hers had your full name, the current one. It was in her bag when we met up. She acted like it was nothing, but I saw the edge of it sticking out, and when I asked, she froze. She said, 'You weren't supposed to see that.'" I swallowed hard. My entire body was starting to sweat. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to sound grounded. "Let's say that's true. Then someone's sending fake letters pretending to be me. Why? Why now? And how did they even know to involve you?" Alara didn't answer, not right away. She just looked at me with that old expression I remembered from our last few weeks together, the one that used to scare me because it meant she knew something I didn't. Finally, she said, "You should talk to your brother." My stomach dropped. "I haven't spoken to him in 5 years, I muttered. "I know," she said, "but maybe that's why he sent it." That night, I sat in my car outside the old garage where my brother used to work. Same fluorescent sign buzzing above the door, same peeling paint. I hadn't been there since the day we stopped speaking, an argument over money, resentment, and the legal mess I left behind when I changed my last name and vanished from our hometown. I wasn't ready to walk in, so I sat there with the car idling, staring at the gloves Maribel had left on the counter. I had brought them with me, thinking they might mean something now. Maybe they were a message, or maybe they were just gloves. I took a deep breath and finally went inside. My brother, Eric, was behind the counter, greasier than I remembered, thinner. But the second he looked up and saw me, his expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised. "Thought you might show up," he said. "I got a letter," I said. "I know," he replied. "I didn't write it." "I did." Just like that. No build-up, no explanation. Just a full confession dropped in my lap like a cinder block. "Why?" I asked, blinking. "Why now?" He shrugged. "Because she's doing it again. The woman you're married to, she's not who you think she is. She never was. And you're not the first guy she's looped." My mouth dried up. I sat down hard on a dusty bench by the door. "I don't believe you," I said. "I know," he replied, "but maybe you'll believe this." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a file folder, thick, stuffed with photos, clippings, and handwritten notes. On the front was a single word, written in marker. Maribel. The folder was heavier than it looked. The cover was creased, slightly damp at one corner, and smelled faintly of gasoline, the kind of scent that wraps around your memories like a warning. Inside, the contents were organized into sections by paper clips and sticky notes in my brother Eric's chaotic handwriting. Each cluster of pages was marked with a year, a name, and a city. I didn't recognize any of the names at first, but the patterns, they were unmistakable. Start with Julian, Eric said, lighting a cigarette even though I hadn't asked. New Haven, 2013. Look familiar? I pulled out the pages labeled Julian Marks, New Hampshire, 13, and felt my stomach twist. The first was a newspaper clipping, a small obituary with no photo. It described a man who died in an apartment fire caused by faulty wiring. He was 31, no next of kin listed. Cause of death, inhalation of toxic smoke. The second was a copy of a fire department incident report, a few scribbled notes in the margin. And then I saw it, a blurry image from the fire escape camera. A woman walking away, face turned from the lens, long coat, hair pulled back. The file didn't say her name, but the handwriting underneath the photo did. Maribel, 80% sure. I looked at Eric, my voice hollow. Where did you get this? He exhaled smoke through his nose like a dragon hoarding bitterness. I didn't, not directly. A guy named Will from Boston sent it to me. Said he had a friend who dated a woman named Anna, real name Maribel, and that things went sideways fast. He found this in her stuff before she left. Thought it was junk until she vanished mid-month. I flipped to the next section. Anna Fields, Boston 15, another man, another strange disappearance. The same odd phrasing in a breakup letter. You have a choice. Stay and listen or walk away. The sentence that had begun this whole nightmare for me. That cold ultimatum delivered with surgical precision in my own kitchen. 3 more files. Different aliases, different cities, same woman, same pattern. She entered their lives like a summer storm, sudden, electric, beautiful, overwhelming, and then left with silence and scorched earth behind her. And in every case they found something, a locked drawer, a hidden note, an old envelope with a fake name. Some of them got suspicious, some didn't live long enough to. This doesn't make sense, I whispered, flipping through the last folder labeled Eric Hart. Wichita 17. My hands froze. Photos. 2 of them. One of Eric, blurry, sitting in a diner booth. The second, of Maribel. Only, it wasn't recent. It was dated 2017, 2 years before I met her. I turned to him, barely able to speak. You dated her too? I didn't know her name was Maribel, he said. She was using the name Elise back then. I met her at a gas station just outside Wichita. We hit it off fast, real fast. She said she loved people who didn't ask questions. I thought I was lucky. He laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was the sound of a man laughing at a joke that made him sick. She left a necklace behind, he said. It had my mom's name on it. No one else ever knew my mom's name. Not even you. Not until years later. My blood ran cold. Ilara, I said slowly. He nodded. That wasn't her real name either, Caleb. She was part of it too. I think she was the first. The world tilted. My chest ached. I couldn't tell if I was breathing. Everything inside me screamed no. That this couldn't be real. That I hadn't been living inside someone else's long con. That my marriage wasn't built on a rotating identity cycle from some deranged emotional saboteur. But the paper didn't lie. The handwriting matched. The phrasing was identical. The face in the blurry photo, Maribel or Elise or Anna or whoever the hell she was burned into my memory the same way her gloves had been left behind like punctuation. Eric reached into the bottom of the drawer and pulled out a plain white envelope. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid, faded, warped at the edges. A younger Maribel, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. He looked terrified. Her smile was calm, too calm. In her hand was a familiar object, a key, silver, worn. I flipped the photo over. One sentence was written on the back. He stayed and listened. I sat back against the wall and felt something in me fracture. She had done this before. And now it was my turn to figure out whether I'd be the one who walked away, or the one who stayed too long and disappeared like the rest. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the garage. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much. I pulled into an empty supermarket parking lot and sat there with the folder in my lap. Its weight now somehow heavier, like the paper itself had started absorbing the lies it contained. The worst part wasn't just what was in it. It was the possibility that it wasn't even everything. That this folder, thick as it was, only scraped the surface of whatever machine Maribel had built around me. I thought about Alara. About that letter she said she'd found. About the way she spoke to me, not like a woman grieving an old love, but like a witness trying to warn the next victim without drawing too much attention. I hadn't seen it then. Now I couldn't unsee it. By the time I got home, the sun had dipped low enough to cast the living room in that strange orange light that made everything look a little too still. The house was quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way an abandoned stage is after a performance, when the actors are gone and the makeup is smeared on a cloth left backstage. I didn't know what I was looking for. Not exactly. But I knew I had missed something. Multiple things. No one constructs an identity this layered, this deliberate, without leaving behind a trail. I had just never known where to look, maybe because I didn't want to see it. I started with the bedroom. Not the obvious places, not the drawers or closet, but behind the headboard, under the mattress, inside the pillowcases, nothing. Then the office. I pulled books from the shelf, tapped walls, scanned every photo frame for signs of tampering. Still nothing, and then I noticed it. A barely there draft coming from the back wall, behind a row of hardcover art books Maribel had never actually read. The corner of the bookshelf had a faint scuff mark, circular, like someone had spun it slightly. I pressed on the edge. Nothing moved, but I kept pressing around until I heard the click. The shelf nudged forward about 2 inches. Behind it, a narrow air vent, not part of any HVAC system. A dummy grate painted over. I pulled at the edge. It was magnetic, popped off with a soft snap. Inside, tucked neatly in a plastic zip bag, was a small leather notebook. No lock. No initials, just plain brown leather, worn and familiar. I carried it to the kitchen, sat down, and opened it. The first page read, Observations, subject number 6. My mouth went dry. I turned the page. Caleb Hart. Baseline personality, quiet, emotionally distant, conflict avoidant, compensates through external structure, calendar routines, low-risk hobbies, social predictability, good candidate for reinforcement testing, early signs of attachment visible. Notes, responds well to silence, avoids confrontation, guilt-prone, possessive but passive, previous trauma associated with romantic abandonment, possibly maternal in nature, avoids discussing past, does not suspect monitoring. My heart pounded. The handwriting was unmistakably Maribel's, the tidy loops, the perfectly even spacing. And then, halfway down the page, this, key moment scheduled, October 4th. Trigger phrase, stay and listen or walk away. Objective, observe choice and record response. I stopped reading. My brain couldn't absorb more, not yet. I looked at the walls around me, the ceiling, the lights. Suddenly, the entire house felt like a stage, like every piece of furniture had been placed not for comfort, but for control. Every decision she made, every fight she avoided, every moment of intimacy. It was all observed, like part of a social experiment I didn't consent to. And the word that kept coming back to me, over and over, like a bell tolling in my chest. Subject. Not partner, not husband. Subject. I forced myself to flip through the rest. The notebook contained 8 sections, each one marked with a different name and number. Each followed the same format. Emotional baselines, observed behaviors, psychological weaknesses, and a planned event. Some were more detailed than others. A few had pages ripped out, but mine was the only one with a postscript. Unscheduled deviation occurred. Alara contacted subject number 6. Variables introduced outside intended arc. Containment required. That word, containment, rattled around in my skull. What the hell did it mean? I slammed the book shut and sat in stunned silence. For a long time. Long enough that the sun dipped fully below the horizon and the room turned blue and formless around me. Then I heard it. A buzz. My phone. A single text. From an unknown number. You found the notebook? Good. Now stop digging. This doesn't end the way you think it does. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in the living room with the lights off and the notebook open on the coffee table like it was breathing. That single sentence, This doesn't end the way you think it does. Kept replaying in my head like a chant. Whoever sent it knew exactly when I'd find the notebook, which meant they had been watching, not once or twice, but constantly. I began noticing details I had previously ignored. The faint discoloration around the smoke alarm in the hallway, the camera-sized gap in the curtain lining of our bedroom, the fact that the Alexa speaker glitched once every morning at 6:04 a.m. Always exactly then, Maribel had built a simulation, a marriage-shaped simulation, and I had lived inside it willingly. By 6 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I messaged Alara, "We need to meet, today, somewhere open. I need the truth, the full truth. No riddles, no poetic detachment. You owe me that," she replied 15 minutes later. Union Pier, 9 a.m., the North End, alone. Bring the notebook. It was 2 hours' drive. I left immediately. Union Pier was nearly empty when I arrived. A long, flat stretch of gray beach, a wind-torn sky, and the kind of cold that made your thoughts tighten around your ribs. Alara was already there, standing near the edge of the dock with her coat zipped high and her hair pinned back, like she had prepared for a trial, not a conversation. I parked, climbed out, and walked toward her, the notebook tucked under my arm like evidence. She didn't turn to greet me. She just stared at the water. "I read it," I said, stopping a few feet behind her. "All of it." Her breath visibly caught. "Then you know?" "I know I wasn't your first," I said. "But I also know I wasn't just some experiment. You wrote about me like I was a subject, but that notebook, your section, it was different." She finally turned to face me. Her eyes looked raw, like she hadn't slept in days. "You were the deviation," she said quietly. "The one who wasn't supposed to last." "I want the whole truth," I said. "Who is she? Who are you? What is this?" She looked at the water for a long time before speaking. "It started as an emotional intelligence project," she said. "A private research initiative, funded by someone very powerful, very hidden. The goal was to test long-term behavioral conditioning using romantic environments, relationships, real ones, or at least close enough." "You're telling me Maribel was part of a study?" I asked, incredulous. Alara shook her head slowly. "Number? She ran it. She was the architect." I took a step back. "She recruited people like me," Alara continued. "People with high empathy, flexible morality, and a fractured past. People who could blend. The candidates, you and others like you, were placed into long-form engagements with us. We weren't acting. We were building connections under controlled triggers, phrases, objects, moments. We tracked reactions, emotional rebounds, breakdowns. Why? I asked, choking. For what possible purpose? To learn how people break, to learn how they heal, to see how much they'd tolerate before leaving, but also to map decision patterns at the level of intimacy most people guard with their lives. And you were okay with this? I snapped. You agreed to be a part of this. No, she said. Not fully. At first I thought it was therapy research. Then I realized it was something else. But by then, I had met you, and I didn't want out. I wanted you. But she said you weren't ready, that your profile hadn't shifted enough yet. I wanted to scream, but my lungs wouldn't move. She ended it, Alara said, eyes distant. Not me, she pulled me out. Told me to vanish, leave no trace, and that if I ever reached out again, she'd bury me under one of the other identities she still had access to. That's why you ghosted, I said, my voice shaking. Yes. I opened the notebook and pointed at the entry that mentioned containment. Is that what this is now? Am I being contained? She thinks you're getting too close to the source, Alara said. And you are. I don't care, I said. She doesn't get to dictate what happens next. Alara looked at me carefully. You still think you're the protagonist in this, Caleb, but you were never the point, not even close. I stared at her, lost. Then who was? She reached into her coat and pulled out a photo, folded, faded. She handed it to me slowly, like a blade. It was a picture of my father, from the early 90s, standing outside a government building I didn't recognize. Arm around a woman, not Maribel, but her exact face, 25 years ago. You're not subject number 6, Alara said, voice trembling. You're subject number 7, the continuation, the replication. And the notebook in my hands suddenly felt like it was burning. I drove home with the photo still in my hand, folded neatly, like it hadn't just set fire to everything I believed about my life. Maribel's face, 2 decades before I met her, looking back at me from my father's past. The implication wasn't just unnerving, it was existential. Either she hadn't aged, or she was part of something that stretched beyond personal betrayal, beyond identity games. And somehow, I had been stitched into it from birth, like a page in someone else's thesis. But I didn't want to chase ghosts anymore. For the first time since this started, I didn't want answers. I wanted peace. When I got back to the house, it was dark, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. Still, I knew she was there. The car was in the driveway. A faint shadow moved through the upstairs window. I opened the door slowly, unsure what I'd say, or if I'd even say anything at all. She was waiting in the kitchen, Maribel, or Elise, or Anna, or whoever she had decided to be today. Same face, different eyes. There was no notebook on the table, no photos, no evidence, just her, and the gloves, folded, exactly as I'd left them. "I knew you'd come back," she said softly. "Why me?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She walked over to the drawer, the one I'd opened that day. The drawer that started all of this, and this time, she opened it herself. Inside was a single piece of paper. Nothing else? She held it out. "Control ends when the subject decides it does. That's what you were meant to learn," she said, "that you always had the choice." I stared at her. Was any of it real? She stepped closer, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no mask, no calm manipulation, just tiredness, regret. "All of it," she whispered. "Too real." That was the problem. I should have yelled, should have asked more questions, demanded confessions, recorded her voice, sent the file to a journalist. I had 1,000 reasons to burn it all down. But instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out the notebook, and dropped it into the sink. She watched in silence as I lit a match and touched it to the edge. The pages curled, the leather smoked, and with it, the versions of me that had been defined by other people's intentions. Burned. "I'm not staying," I said, "but I'm not running either." She nodded. No protest, no apology. I walked out without slamming the door, without looking back. 6 months later, I live in a small cottage 2 towns away, near a lake that doesn't ask questions. I see Eric once a week. We don't talk about the past. Sometimes silence is better than understanding. I go to therapy. I volunteer at the library. I even wrote a short story again, the first since all this began. Ilara emailed once, no cryptic phrases, no shadows, just, "I'm healing too. You were the only real thing." And that's enough for me. Some people find peace in answers. I found mine in walking away from the drawer and choosing to build a life no one else scripted. I don't need to know everything anymore. I just need to live it.